Hello and welcome. It's time for French politics here on France 24. I'm Mark Perlman. Coming up this week, the French, after the presidential elections, are once again heading back to the polls, this time to elect a new National Assembly. And pollsters are predicting a landslide in favor of President Emmanuel Macron. We'll also take a close look at the explosive battle in the southern city of Marseille, where far-left leader Jean-Luc Mélenchon is defying his old Socialist party. Also this week, the government wants to usher in drastic changes to France's labor law, a risky move. The first results of the parliamentary elections are in. Last weekend, the French living abroad voted to elect their MPs. It was only the first round, however, the results are very interesting. There are 11 seats up for grabs, and the party of President Emmanuel Macron is leading in 10 of those races. This obviously doesn't tell the whole story about the rest of the election, and we'll now take a look at how these parliamentary elections work.
Elections that are being abandoned by French people but are essential for the government of the country. Parliamentary elections in France are not organised at a national level like the presidentials, but by constituency. There are 577 in France who each send an MP to the National Assembly. Parliamentary candidates must win more than 50% to pass the first round. If not, a second round is organised with candidates having obtained a suffrage of at least equal to 12.5% of registered voters. This system favours the big parties, to the detriment of smaller ones who would prefer a proportional electoral system. Despite being more representative of the electorate, proportional voting brought about political instability in the Fourth Republic. It disappeared in constitutional reforms in 1962. The party's objective is 289 MPs, an absolute majority. It can then legislate without negotiating with any other bodies. Since 2002, abstention never stopped rising. It reached almost 45% in 2012. However, these elections directly determine who will govern over the next 5 years. The new president's party is only 1 year old and, for the moment, has no elected representatives. The National Front has only 2 MPs. As for the traditional left and right, they are more divided than ever.
Well, this coming election will certainly lead to an upheaval in French politics. Just take a look at the latest polls. The president's party is well ahead when you look at their percentage, 31% of voting intentions, but it's even more interesting and more telling if you look at the seat projections. In the National Assembly, the absolute majority is 289 seats, and the polls are showing that Republic onwards, the party of Emmanuel Macron, could obtain over 400 seats. That is more than 100 seats over the majority threshold. This would be a major change, and the two traditional parties, the Socialist and the Conservative, would probably reach record lows. So that would be indeed a sea change in French politics. We'll obviously be following this very closely, and we'll give you an update next week. In the meantime, here's what the Prime Minister, Edouard Philippe, had to say about this coming election.
We must take French people seriously, take the voters seriously, tell them clearly what we want to do, propose to them the incredible audacity shown by the President and the new way of doing politics we are working to achieve, so we can gain a majority in Parliament and allow the country to recover.
So a clearly confident Prime Minister. In the meantime, in the opposition, the Conservatives and the far right are attacking an announced tax increase. However, they seem to realize that the odds are clearly against them.
I will vote for all the projects that are going in the right direction, but nobody will make me deny my beliefs. I will never vote for the increase in social security contributions, and I will never defend an immigration policy that wants to increase the number of foreigners in France.
We're the only ones able to stand against Emmanuel Macron's policy, a policy of social destruction, which calls for tough labour reforms and an increase in social security, while being weak when it comes to security.
In the meantime, another of Emmanuel Macron's key opponents, Jean-Luc Mélenchon, the far-left leader, is running for the parliamentary seat in the southern port city of Marseille. He is running against an incumbent socialist candidate and is probably going to be one of the most interesting races in the forthcoming legislative elections.
Marseille's Bouches-du-Rhône constituency is about to become a focal point of France's legislative elections, especially for those eager to see what's in store for the French left. Jean-Luc Mélenchon, a former presidential candidate, won 39% of first-round votes here.
The political class is against me, but the voters are with me, so it's good.
The man he's trying to unseat is outgoing Socialist MP Patrick Mannucci. And faced with the Mélenchon threat, he's hitting the pavements. He knows it won't be easy.
The
fact that Mélenchon's in the running changes things. It might lead voters to think about whether voting Mélenchon is actually a good idea, or if supporting him means they just waste their vote. Mélenchon rejects the possibility of any leftist alliance. He'll end up with 15 MPs. What he's doing is completely useless.
Left-wing infighting that could well play into the hands of Corinne Versini, a candidate for President Macron's La République En Marche party. She's now on a mission to convince Marseille's residents that Mélenchon would be bad news for the city.
I really hesitated before putting myself forward, but when I heard that Mélenchon would be contesting the seat, I decided to go for it. There's no reason why Mélenchon should be coming here to do his advertising. People here want to see new political faces.
Although not everyone agrees. Jeanne Marty is a local municipal councillor from the National Front. Her party's presidential candidate won just 14% of votes here in May.
It's true that it's a mainly left-leaning constituency, but we have something important to say. I'm from here. Voters see me living my life here. Because I think progress only happens when you're really able to listen to voters. It doesn't happen in offices.
In all, 20 people are fighting to represent this constituency of Bouches-du-Rhône. The candidates here know they have their work cut out.
Well, the results of those parliamentary elections will clearly have an impact on the reform agenda of Emmanuel Macron. One of the key reforms he promised during his campaign was to change France's labor law, and to do this quickly and deeply. And this could prove an explosive issue because the unions are warning that this could spell trouble.
Reforming France's labour code has long been a political minefield, but it's a priority for Emmanuel Macron. According to a draft plan revealed by Le Parisien newspaper, the French president wants to take a hands-on approach, making changes to the law by a series of executive orders. Under the 8-point draft plan, bosses would be able to negotiate working conditions directly with their employees rather than being required to honour industry-wide agreements. Conditions for firing, short-term contract durations and severance pay will be determined not by law but by company-specific deals. There would also be a ceiling for compensation determined by labour tribunals for unfair dismissal. The paper says the draft document is dated the 12th of May. The government says it could not have been leaked by its members because it was drawn up before Macron took office.
It's simply a document about everything that was said during his election campaign. I don't know where it comes from, but it's not from the government, and certainly it's not a draft plan.
The centrist president has repeatedly said that France's rigid labour code and administrative red tape are hampering economic growth and job creations. Unions are up in arms over any drastic reform. Far-left former presidential candidate Jean-Luc Mélenchon says the document is tantamount to a declaration of social war. The Labour minister is going to meet union leaders before starting negotiations, and Parliament is expected to give its green light in July.
The labour law reform clearly a major undertaking for the government. In the meantime, the Justice Minister has unveiled an ambitious bill to quote-unquote moralize France's political life. It's a raft of drastic measures that could upend not only the political scene here in France, but also the judiciary.
tackling a drop in confidence in politicians among the French public. The first big legislative project announced by the new government will deal with political nepotism.
For years, we have seen practices develop that create cracks in the confidence that citizens have in their elected officials, and which provoke the profound exasperation of the French. We therefore collectively need a return to confidence.
As part of the new raft of measures, French MPs can now be judged by magistrates. Elected officials will not be able to hold more than 3 successive mandates as an MP, senator or local executive, and elected officials can no longer employ family members. This last measure has been brought in following events on the presidential election campaign trail at the end of last year. Conservative candidate François Fillon faced outrage when it was discovered he'd given his wife and children job roles with astronomical pay that they allegedly didn't carry out. In return for supporting Emmanuel Macron's on-the-move bid for the presidency, François Bayrou demanded this new legislation. However, the announcement of an anti-nepotism bill was overshadowed by the investigation into the new territorial cohesion minister, Richard Ferrand. Ferrand's partner may have profited from a property deal while he was the head of an insurance company renting office space from her.
Last week, we saw something very unusual in France. A French president speaking in public and in English. Emmanuel Macron decided to respond in the most direct of ways to Donald Trump's decision to pull out of the Paris climate deal.
We all share the same responsibility. Make our planet great again.
This brings us to the end of our program. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you next week here on the Political Brief to comment on the results of round 1 of the parliamentary elections. In the meantime, here are some pictures from the past week.